Volume 2, Friends Like These. Chapter 1, Quinton, The First Rule of Gambling. The bar reeked of spilled beer and stale perfume, of cheap cigars and old sweat. It echoed with the clack of billiard balls and the occasional clink of coin being anteed. Wally was cleaning glasses behind the counter. A ragamuffin was sweeping the floors. Quinton Mallory felt right at home. He looked over at the billiard table, where a half-orc and a Calishite man were playing a game. Quinton downed his shot. "I'll wager you were dragging to call the game," Quinton said to the sod sitting next to him. The man pulled his head out of his drink long enough to see the state of the table. Stripes was down to 2 balls, while Solids had 4. "Stripes," he slurred, and dropped a gold coin on the counter. "Then I've got Solids," Quinton responded, and plunked down a coin to match it. The Calishite man sunk another shot, leaving him with just 1 ball on the table. The drunken sod started reaching for the coins, but Quinton stopped him. The Calishite had just missed his 2nd shot. The half-orc played next, and sunk a ball of his own. Then he sunk the other 3. Quinton pulled the coins in over in front of him. The sod just grumbled. It didn't take the doxy long. She ambled over and sat down beside him. Her hair was brown, dyed gold. Her smile was forced, just like all the others. "Looking for a good time, sweetheart?" "Always," Quinton said, and tapped the counter with his new coin. "Wally, pepper whiskey, and keep 'em comin'." Wally brought him a glass and traded Quinton's gold coin for a stack of silver ones. Quinton took a few and held them up to the doxy. "I've got 3 to spare," Quinton said. 3 shards? What do you think I am?"
"Darling, I think we've established what you are. Now we're just haggling over price."
She left in a huff. The young ones always did. Most of the old ones, too. Thought they had something special between their legs, like he'd never had any before in his life. But he'd pay in gold when he found one made of gold. Till then, a bottle of spicy liquor was friend enough. Quinton eyed the card game in the center of the room. The pile of brass toll between them said everything. That was decent money riding there. None of his concern, though. It was his day off. He sipped his whiskey. It burned in his throat, warmed up his gut. Stuff was supposed to make you feel alive. That he didn't need reminding of. The ache in his joints, the lines on his face, those were reminders enough. And, of course, the ringing. The God's damned ringing. No, he drank the swill because it dulled all those reminders, helped him feel numb, drowned out the ringing. That, and it was piss cheap. Excuse me, sir," came a small voice, "but you dropped this." Quinton looked to the side. The cleaning boy was picking something off the floor by one of the card players. The king of clubs, to be precise. The man he was addressing, a half-elf with a burn scar on his left cheek, stared at him, wide-eyed with confusion.
"What the hell's is this shit?" shouted his Aluskan opponent, slamming the table with 2 meaty fists. "I don't know," the half-elf snapped back. "What the fuck are you doing, kid?"
It's just, I thought you might want your card back," the kid said, his voice trembling. "I saw it fall out of your pant leg and—"
"You gull fucking cheat!" the Aluskan roared and dove across the table, sending ale, cards, and coin flying.
"Right now, stop all this," cried Wally, rushing around to break up the fight. In the commotion, Quinton noticed the little urchin snatch up some of the toll. Not many, not obviously. 1 sweep of the hand, then he faded into the background.
"Clever little squirt."
A chair broke as the Aluskan swung at his opponent. Quinton pulled his hat a bit lower. It wasn't his problem. And Wally was a son of a bitch, besides. A few bruises might do wonders for his personality. Quinton wanted none of it. It was his day off. The sweep boy darted behind the bar, grabbing a small fistful of nibs from underneath the counter. Then he made a beeline for the back door. Quinton just pounded down the last of his drink. Not his problem. Then the little bastard grabbed a bottle on his way out. The pepper whiskey. The last goddamn bottle of the stuff. But of course he did. And on Quinton's day off, no less. Quinton found the kid 2 streets over, taking a stock of his haul. He had apparently picked up a friend along the way, a little blonde girl. "You started a fight?" the girl exclaimed in surprise. "Was anybody hurt?" "What? I don't know," the kid said, holding out his hands full of coins.
Forget about that. Would you look at all this money we got? This will last us for weeks.
And you stole from Mr. Plainsmore? Said the girl. What if he calls the watch?
He's not gonna call the watch.
But what?
Will you stop worrying? We're rich, the kid said. Here, let's try some of this to celebrate.
Now it was Quinton's problem. He rounded the corner and the two kids froze. Can we help you, sir? The little girl asked. He figured she was about 8 or 9. The boy didn't look to be much older. But he rose from his crouched position and stood protectively in front of her.
You got something of mine, Quinton said, pointing at the bottle.
Sorry, Gramps, but this is ours, the boy said.
Take a walk.
Quinton arched an eyebrow and crossed his arms. The girl cowered slightly.
Kid, have you ever tried pepper whiskey?
The kid looked at him, then at the bottle, then back to him.
No.
The old gambler sighed and leaned against the wall. This would be faster if he tried the easy way first.
Well then, have yourself a taste, Quinton said, waving his hand.
Go on.
My treat.
The kid looked at him with confusion. Then he slowly raised the bottle to his lips and took far too large of a swig. The little punk winced at the taste and nearly gagged as he swallowed, coughing violently.
Gods, that's disgusting, he choked out between coughs. Grown-ups actually drink that? It burns.
His little friend patted him on the back as he coughed. He lifted the bottle up to her. Here, you try it, he said.
What? Why would I drink that? You just said it was disgusting.
Because I tried it, so now you try it.
How does that make any sense?
It's a rule.
A dumb rule.
Quinton cleared his throat.
Well, now you tried it. Was it everything you'd hoped it'd be? Now hand it over.
The kid clutched the bottle tightly.
Look, Quinton sighed. You obviously didn't like the stuff, so there's no point in holding on to it.
You don't know that.
I might like it. Learn to like it.
Quinton drummed his fingers.
This fucking kid.
Well, if you want it so bad, the kid said, relaxing a bit, what will you trade me for it?
Trade? Squirt, that stuff isn't yours to begin with, he said, straightening up and taking a few steps closer. I came down here with a mind for that bottle. I left good silver back there for it, and I even gave you a taste. I'm not about to pay for it twice.
Yeah? Well, I'm not going to give away something that's mine for free.
You can keep the coin. I don't even care about it. That should be payment enough.
The coin's mine, too. I don't need your permission to keep it. Quinton towered over the boy. He stared into the lad's little hazel eyes and narrowed his own.
Ballsy, stupid runt. What's your name, Squirt?
A grin stretched across the kid's face.
I'm Jet. Jet Archer.
Jet Archer, Quinton said with mild amusement. That's a stupid name.
It is not.
That's the best name your back-alley slut of a mother could come up with? The Squirt scowled at him.
Don't talk about my mom that way.
Fuck you, kid,
and your whore mother.
The kid clocked him in the knee with the whiskey. It didn't break the bottle, thankfully, but Quinton went toppling nonetheless.
What did you do? The girl shouted.
Come on, let's get out of here, he said and rushed off, pulling her behind him.
That little shit. How did he know? That was Quinton's bad knee.
Leading Emma by the hand, Artemis rushed down the alley back the way he had come. He didn't know how that old geezer had found him, but he'd never expect them to backtrack. Then they'd just hop a wall or two, squeeze through a fence, maybe even hide in one of the charred ruins of some tenements, and they'd be in the...
There's a little shit now!
Artemis rounded the corner, only to come face to fire-scarred face of the half-elf from the bar, talking to a member of the watch. Apparently Wally had called them. The guard, a tall, wiry man with hair that reached below his shoulders, glared at them, then eyed the whiskey in Artemis's hand.
Stop right there, he commanded,
but Artemis spun around and dashed down the side street. Emma rushed to keep pace with him, darting this way and that, the sound of heavy footsteps following them wherever they went. The half-elf had joined the guard in the chase, and they were closing in.
They're catching up, she shouted to him. Maybe if you apologize and give everything back. Don't worry, I know this area good. Just a little bit further.
He looked back at her, a clever grin on his face. She felt herself smile. Artemis knew what he was doing. Whenever he grinned like that, it meant he had a plan. "There's a building up ahead with a hole in its wall. We can squeeze through it and hide in the basement." They rounded the corner. The building they had been rushing towards had collapsed in last night's storm, its wreckage blocking the entire street. "No," she heard him whisper. They spun, but their path had been cut off. "And, you're sure that's him?" the guard panted, looking to the half-elf. "I already told you, Durant. I looked the kid square in the face. That's him. Don't know about the girl, though."
"She didn't do anything," Artemis shouted. "It was just me, so leave her alone."
The guard, Durant, sneered at him with hate in his cold gray eyes. "She ran with you," he said, a faint hiss to his voice. "That makes her an accomplice." He started walking towards them, twirling his spear slowly as he did. "Besides, one way or another, all rats end up acting the same. That's why you don't bother trying to separate the good ones from the bad." The blunt end of his spear clocked Artemis across the face, and he crumpled with the blow, dropping the bottle and spilling the coins he had collected across the ground. "You just killed them all." He smashed it down across the boy's back when he tried to stand, then kicked him hard in the ribs. Artemis groaned and struggled to breathe.
"Please stop. We're sorry. We'll never—"
He heard Emma start before breaking into a scream. He opened his eyes enough to see the half-elf had grabbed her by one wrist.
"Leave her,"
he tried to say, then felt Durant grab him by the shirt and hoist him to his feet. "Miserable little gutter snipes. I'm a blacksmith's son, born and raised. I've got name, I've got station. I should be up in Sea Ward, taking it easy, watching some high lord's mansion. But instead I'm down here, mucking around with you trash. They say shit flows downhill, and there's nothing lower in Waterdeep than Dock Ward's scum."
"If that's true, then I guess all those lords must be pretty full of shit."
The half-elf actually laughed at that one, but Durant just growled. "That's some mouth you got on you. Little kids shouldn't be using language like that." He reached down and grabbed the whiskey bottle, popping the cap off as he did. "I think someone needs to wash out that dirty mouth of yours." He crushed Artemis's windpipe, forcing him to gasp. Then he rammed the bottle's neck down the boy's throat. Artemis thrashed and began to choke as burning alcohol filled his mouth. "Come on, kids, swallow it down. What's the matter? Don't you want to be like the adults?" Artemis gagged on the bottle and felt his stomach turn inside out, but couldn't retch, couldn't breathe. "Drink it up, you little shit. Isn't this what you wanted?" He could hear Emma crying, begging Durant to stop. Artemis felt his eyes beginning to roll back. Suddenly, Durant pulled the bottle out and let him drop. Artemis vomited up what whiskey he had swallowed, along with his lunch, desperately gasping for breath. Each time he inhaled, he felt his lungs burn from the scalding blend of acid, bile, and whiskey. "Waste of good booze," the half-elf said. "What's wrong, runt? Don't like how it tastes?" "Course he doesn't. You can steal liquor, talk shit, and act like a big shot all you want," Durant said as he knelt down in front of Artemis. "But in the end, you're still nothing but a little rat-eating kid." Durant lashed out and pulled Artemis's head back by the hair. His eyes widened in excitement, and a smile stretched hideously across his face. It was a thin, wide, toothy grin, the kind of thing that belonged on a wolf or a reptile. "But do you want to see how a whiskey bottle can make you an adult?" He looked to the half-elf. "Hold her down, I'll get her legs."
"Emma!"
Artemis yelled in a choking cry. But Durant smashed him upside the head and he collapsed. His vision was swimming, his head was ringing, but he could hear her screaming. Hot tears filled his eyes. "Please, leave her alone." "Relax, kid. Once we're done with her, you'll get another turn with the bottle, though that might not be for a while."
"She didn't do any of this. I'm the one to blame."
"Now stop all that squirming, darling, or I might just miss. Not like it'll matter."
"Emma, I'm so sorry."
"There you kids are," boomed a voice. At the end of the alley stood what looked to Artemis to be a storm cloud, a relentless, dark gray thunderhead rolling down the street. It wore the shape of a man, square-faced, with steel-gray hair and stubble, a nose that had clearly been broken too many times, and dressed in a cheap suit, frayed at certain edges, and a fedora. Instead of rain or ozone, the storm brought with it the scent of rancid cigar smoke and aftershave so heavy the old guy might have been drinking it. "I told you two to come straight to me," he bellowed. "What the hells do you call this?" The half-elf froze.
Mallory. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for tracking down my kids. You say these two are with you? Durant shouted, his anger flaring. Technically, yes. They're two of my protégés. I had them practicing some basics, and it all kind of got out of hand. They stole liquor and coin, and they... I'm aware of what they did, officer. I was there, watching the whole time. It all sort of spiraled rather quickly, but I had every intention of compensating everyone involved. He reached into his coat and produced a small pouch that jingled with money, then tossed it to the half-elf. That should just about cover it, I think. The half-elf reached inside and pulled out a platinum crescent with an electrum inlay. It glittered in the thin beam of sunlight that filtered down into the alley. Artemis had never seen its kind before. Harbor moons. Durant, there's 6 harbor moons in here. The guard scowled bitterly. The money isn't what matters, it's the principle, the integrity of the law. It's my job to keep the peace, and I intend to do just that. Quinton looked over the guard's shoulder. The girl was sobbing into her knees. The little shit had her cradled in his arms. Integrity of the law, indeed. Oh, I understand entirely, officer. You see, I'm a member of a peacekeeping force myself, Quinton said, rolling up his sleeve and revealing a tattoo of a winged serpent devouring the world. You might have heard of them? It was a lie, of course. Quinton Mallory was no more a Zent than a saint. But the mark proved useful to have, and he paid the local guild leader well enough that she looked the other way. Durant just curled his lip and walked off, grumbling darkly to himself and arguing with the elf over his cut of the moons. When they were gone, Artemis rose to his feet and walked towards Quinton. Thank you for helping us, just... Quinton took one giant step forward and drove his fist right into the boy's gut, just under the ribs. It was a punch that had taken down fresh prime fighters during his days in the ring. If using it on a wounded child in any way bothered Quinton Mallory, he gave no hint of it. First rule of gambling, squirt. Never play a game you can't win. The force and angle of the blow actually lifted Artemis about an inch off the ground, and he blacked out as all the air left his lungs at once. Emma screamed again and scrambled over to him. Artemis, are you okay? So that's his name. Pretty fancy for a dock rat. He was trying to apologize. Why did you do that? Because he stole from me. It was just a bottle of that gross pepper stuff. It ain't about the booze or the money. It's because he crossed a man he didn't understand, so he ended up in a situation he couldn't control. You didn't have to hurt him. Yeah, I did. Besides, I owed it to him for sucker punching my bad knee. You could have taken it easy. He was already hurt. If I didn't hit him with everything I had, then he wouldn't have learned the lesson. Life doesn't pull punches, so why should I? Artemis shot awake with a gasp, clutching his ribs. You hear me, Squirt? That pain you're feeling? That anger? That's the gap. The gap between what I am and what you are. You may not like it, but it's there, and no amount of guts or good intentions is going to let you cross it. Better to see it, accept it, and work around it. 'Cause next time, no one's going to save you, or her. Quinton turned and walked away. So much for his day off. You call that a punch? Artemis wheezed. Quinton stopped. This stupid fucking kid. What did you say? I couldn't hear your little runt voice from over here. You said you weren't holding back, but you're a liar. Quinton started walking back, cracking his knuckles. The kid met his eyes. And what makes you say that? Quinton asked. Your ear. Quinton came to a halt, then slowly touched his left ear. It was swollen and deformed, near to closing. My dad, he works the docks loading boats. I've gone with him a few times, and I've seen guys with ears like that. I've seen them fight, and I've seen how hard they can hit. If one of them punched me, I'd probably get knocked out completely. But here I am. Quinton regarded him. He ought to punch the little shit again, this time holding nothing back. That'd show him. It'd also kill him. But this kid intrigued him enough that he'd rather not. The kid was cocky, mouthy too, but wasn't everyone when they were young? And he had some skills. The little stunt at the bar had been pretty clever. He had a good eye for detail, seeing as he spotted Quinton's cauliflower ear like that. He could even palm coins fairly well. He was raw, unshaped, untested. Quinton could work with that. Quinton reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a small notebook bound in soft, dark leather. Squirt, you got a lot of brains, but not a whole lot of smarts. So here, take this, You come work for me, you pay off those moons I just lost on you, and I'll help you fill that book with smarts. Enough smarts that you might even close that gap. Corner of Jack and Snapper." He tossed the notebook onto the ground in front of him and walked off. It was high time he started enjoying his day off. Quinton Mallory stared at the man who had once been his protégé and wondered where 20 years had gone. "Gotta say, I'm surprised to see you," he said, settling into the booth. "Man's gotta come home eventually," replied Artemis, taking a seat across from him. "No offense, Squirt, but this town hasn't been much of a home to you for a while." "You're telling me." Artemis tapped the table, then lifted up 2 fingers, made a clenched fist, and then stuck out his thumb to the side. Old Wally nodded. "How are things in that regard?" Artemis asked, leaning a bit closer. Quinton fished a cigar out of his pocket along with a match. He took a long drag on it and leaned back, considering. "Well, that bounty Brightwater put on your head's expired, but he's still kicking around up there. Plus your statute isn't up, so Force Gray's still a problem." "I don't plan on making enough waves for them to notice." "You never did, and yet here we are." "Who's running the numbers these days? Anyone I should know?" "Well, Shark's out. Has been for a while. Decker up and got himself killed. Now his turf belongs to someone named Tanavast. Benny's still around, but way I hear it, you've got bigger problems these days than a couple of old loan sharks and back-alley bashers. What's this I hear about you riling up Zents?" Wally came over with their drinks. A pair of scotches. Quinton had half expected it to be pepper whiskey. Why was he disappointed that it wasn't? "I played cat's eye with someone I shouldn't. Turns out he's a sore loser." "Bashaba pass you over, Squirt. What made you stupid enough to play the antler game in the first place?" Artemis raised an eyebrow at him. "What made you stop praying to a god all of a sudden, you old geezer?" Quinton sipped his drink. Artemis did the same. "So what does bring you to town?" "I'm just passing through, collecting on some old favors along the way." "Which way you heading?" "Yata. Got a fix on some horses. You want to tag along? Easy money." Quinton chuckled. "Nah, it's early in the season, and cold doesn't agree with me like it used to." Artemis downed the last of his drink. He'd come a long way from that little runt in the alley, wincing at his alcohol. Then he tossed a pair of toll onto the table and grabbed his coat. "You in that much of a hurry, Squirt?" "Unfortunately, I'm on a bit of a badger hunt right now. Thanks for the info, old man. Have a few rounds on me." Quinton watched him go, and as he did he resembled not so much a man but a shadow, gliding between pools of sputtering candlelight. That stupid little shit. He had forgotten. Well, perhaps he couldn't blame him, at least too much. All that had been 20 years ago, after all. 20 years ago today, in fact. Even so, Quinton Mallory sipped his drink and wondered why it bothered him so. Chapter 2. Badger. Someone to hug. Not for the first time that day, Badger Trufflestuff regretted having an anteater strapped to his back. Sure, the thing was still a baby, and yeah, it was in a tiny cage, but it seemed to move about constantly, and, if he was being completely honest, it was starting to smell. But the absolute worst thing about this anteater, he would have to say, a quarrel zipped through the air right past his head, sticking into a nearby barrel with a deafening thump. Would be all the people trying to kill him for it. "Get back here!" one of the men shouted, drawing a sword from its sheath. Badger reached to his side and grabbed a gutter spout, using it as an anchor to sharply turn a corner into a narrow side street. His pursuers followed, but didn't slow down enough and slipped on deuce-slick cobblestones as they turned. Badger gave them a wink, then sprinted ahead. If he could time it just right... With a skid and a tumble, the little halfling rolled between the legs and under the wheels of an oncoming ox cart, the creature on his back giving out an excited cry as he did so. The cart's driver looked back in confusion, then turned in surprise when he saw 3 armed men rushing his wagon. "Get this piece of shit out of the way!" one demanded as he looked for an opening. No good. The cart took up the entire width of the alley. "It's a free city. I go wherever I damn well please. You want to get somewhere? Why don't you back up and go around?" "Look, asshole, do you know who we are? Move or else." Hey, where am I gonna go, pal? Backwards? Or maybe I should just go through you? Badger just chuckled to himself. That ought to keep them busy for a few minutes. He picked up speed, hoping to fully exploit his window, when he suddenly felt his feet leave the ground. He kicked the empty air as someone hoisted him up by the back of his shirt. "Well, well, Badger Trufflestuff," came a voice. "Last time I saw you, I got covered in owlbear pheromone and chased for a mile and a half. If memory serves, Artemis Black, you left me hanging from a tree the time before that, and without my pants, if I'm not mistaken. You shiftless two-timing smuggler. You underhanded itinerant gambler." The two stared at each other for a long moment, then burst into laughter. "So, are you going to put me down now?" Badger asked. "That depends. Do you have the 120 dragons you owe me?" Come on, Black. You know I don't have that much on me right now." "No, it would appear you are encumbered by more exotic wares," Artemis said, examining the tiny cage. "What is that?" "Cholton golden anteater. Very rare. Their grounded bones are apparently excellent spell components, and their pelts sell for a pretty copper." You aren't planning on..." "What? No, I've got to buy in Neverwinter with a private menagerie. He's willing to pay me a mint for little Dewey here." "How much are we talking?" 30 harbor moons." Artemis looked like he might go into shock. "He's going to pay you 1,500 gold dragons for a bug-eating rat?" "Rare tree-dwelling anteater," Badger corrected. "And yes, more than enough to set us up for a good while." "What do you mean, us? Were you planning on cutting me in?" "Depends. Can you help me get away from someone?" "Well, a couple of someones." "Well, a couple of someones and maybe the city watch." "I want 30%. "All's frozen taint, 30%. I'll cut you in at 10. "That barely clears your debt to me, 25. "Well, you won't see a nib of those guys string me up. 15. Suddenly a series of angry shouts and the sounds of oncoming footsteps reverberated down the alley. 20% it is, they both exclaimed, and started hurrying towards the back of the alley, where a set of rickety stairs led up to a second-story door. Just as they were almost at the top, a trio of men, clad in dark leathers and wielding long swords, rounded the corner. Sewn onto their pauldrons was a deep green symbol of a winged serpent. "Badger, you son of a bitch! You didn't say there was Antarum!" "Oh, are they Zants? I couldn't tell as I was running for my life." They reached the top of the steps, but rather than go through the door, Artemis leaned over the railing and grabbed onto the roof covering the doorway. He hoisted himself up, then grabbed Badger's outstretched hand and pulled. Inside of his cage, Dewey gave a low, ululating bellow that bellied his true size, then thrashed about. The sudden motion jerked the halfling violently, and Artemis nearly lost his footing as a result. Once they were up and running along the rooftop, Artemis slipped off his backpack. "Quick, put him in here." "Oh, no. I'm not going to just give you Dewey." "I don't care about your fucking aardvark, but it'll be a lot easier to transport him this way." Badger narrowed his eyes in suspicion, but saw the logic. As it was, if the anteater squirmed at the wrong moment, he might cause Badger to miss a jump, and that would be bad for everyone involved. Grumbling to himself about how it was an anteater, not an aardvark, he shoved Dewey, cage and all, into the pack. Behind them, the Zents had managed to get to the roof. Artemis tossed the pack to Badger and yelled for him to keep going, as if he'd stay behind otherwise. The gambler, on the other hand, just stood there, smiling, as the thugs closed in, swords drawn. He wasn't going to actually fight them, was he? "You picked the wrong night, Dandy," one of them shouted as they lunged, swords glinting in the moonlight. Artemis hopped back, and as he did so emptied the contents of a pouch on his belt. A collection of small metal spheres, scattering them across the roof. Not ball bearings, Badger realized. They were too shiny. Wait, are those pachinko balls? It was easy to guess what happened next, as momentum carried the three attackers right onto the patch of spheres, causing them to trip and tumble over each other. Badger threw his partner an approving thumbs up from the safety of the next rooftop. Artemis managed to break clear of the Zent's reach, then leaped across the gap, rushing to catch up with the halfling. "Good work," Badger shouted back to him. "We'll have an easier time now that we don't have to worry about being shot with a crossbow." "What do you mean? Those guys weren't carrying crossbows." "Oh shit." In the stillness of the night, Badger heard the loud click as clearly as if it were thunder. Up ahead. "Get down!" he shouted, and threw himself to the floor, cradling the backpack as he did. The bolt came soaring over his head a second later, so close he heard the whoosh of it.
He scrambled forward and pressed himself against the parapet. He shot a glance back and saw Artemis scurrying to the parapet wall to his right. Badger took a deep breath, gathered his courage, and peeked over the low wall. He could see the figure across the gap, no more than 10 feet away, probably less. It was a good thing he was so low to the ground, or he'd never had dodged that shot. He didn't know how Artemis had, but the bastard had always been lucky like that. "I don't suppose that's you, is it, Cyreza? Look, why don't you put that pea shooter down and we can talk about this?" "Nine hells take you, truffle stuff. I want my money back," the archer shouted back. "Yep, that's her." "A friend of yours?" asked Artemis, crawling over to him. "And what is she saying about money?" "Nothing. Don't worry about it. Look, we need to get out of here before she decides to—" There suddenly came a rush of footsteps, then a dark shape leaped onto the rooftop from up ahead. A woman dressed in dark leathers stood before them, the silvery gleam of a curved dagger polished to a mirror finish in her hand. "And I want my possum." "Anteater, actually," he said, trying hard not to let his voice crack in fear. "Look, I think there's been a bit of miscommunication," Artemis said in a glib tone. "My friend here—" Cyreza pointed the dagger straight at him. "I don't know who you are, Fancy Pants, but you're on the wrong side of this. Your friend here just stole from the Zentarum." He could feel Artemis's eyes narrow as she continued. "We had a deal, 150 dragons for that dumb possum. We meet up for the handoff. I hold up my end, and what does he do? He double-crosses me, runs off with both the money and the animal." "You're going to hoit him." "You had my money on you this whole time, you bastard?" Artemis snapped at him. "You dragged me into this for the sake of some blonde weasel? It's an anteater." "Seems like he screwed you over, too. Look, all I really want is the animal. Give it to me, and I'll leave you two to sort out the money," said Cyreza, folding her arms in amusement. "Deal!" Artemis exclaimed, and ripped Badger's pack right off his shoulders. "Oi, that's mine!" "And there's Zent's. Fuck you, you little swindler!" That gave Badger an idea. "All right, two can play at this game." "Oi, Cyreza," he said with a wide grin. "Weren't your boys looking for someone named Black a few months ago? What was that again?" Cyreza's expression suddenly became very serious, and she started studying Artemis with the scrutiny of a jeweler. Black hair, slight frame, curled mustache, and fancy clothes. "What did you say your name was again?" Artemis just glared at Badger, who shot him back an extremely self-satisfied smile. "You asshole." "Oh, this is too perfect," she said with a laugh. "Our Johnny was just harping on me yesterday about looking for you. Fancy Pants, you just made my year." "Wait," the gambler shot back, real fear in his voice. "Are you saying our Johnny is here?" "Oops." "He sure is. Why don't we go have a chat with him? What do you say?" Well, that made things more complicated. Did he just hear Artemis gulp? "You know, that sounds like a wonderful idea and all, but I really should—" "What in the nine hells?" Artemis started, his voice trailing off as he noticed something behind Cyreza. The Zent looked puzzled, then glanced over her shoulder to see whatever it was that was confusing him. Artemis bolted. Badger grinned as he did, then realized that the gambler was still carrying the backpack with Dewey. "You jackass, now I'm roped into your mess." He dashed after Artemis, cursing Cyreza on his tail. He didn't get far, perhaps 3 or 4 roofs over, when he felt her hand grasping at the back of his shirt, causing him to stumble. He had the presence of mind, however, to twist as he did, breaking her grip and off-balancing her enough that she tripped over his falling form and the two went tumbling together. He hurried to his feet and tried to dart off, but Cyreza rolled onto her side and kicked his legs out from under him, then twisted onto her stomach and pushed herself to her feet in a single fluid motion. Nimble minx, this. He barely had time to roll out of the way of her stabbing attacks, first to the left, then to the right, then found his chance to kick up into her stomach, simultaneously knocking the wind out of her and pushing her bodily. He scrambled away and started to rise again, but suddenly felt her boot between his shoulders. She stomped him down with all the force she could muster. His head bounced against the roof. The world is spinning, his head hurts. Someone kicks him, his side aches. He's on his back. Someone has rolled him over. There's someone standing over him. It's a woman. She looks like a shadow. There is silver in her hand. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," comes a voice. It sounds familiar. "Oh, and why is that?" the woman says. "Cyreza." "You might soon regret it." The voice is closer. He tilts his head back and he sees a man standing at the other end of the roof, holding a backpack. Artemis. He came back. He holds the pack out behind him, off the edge of the roof. Dewey. Hey, drop it if you want. Let it fall. You're worth way more to me. Sure, our Johnny will probably pay a lot more, but with what money? It's stuff like this that pays your organization's bills. How are your superiors going to feel when they find out you botched a mission to line your own pockets? Or are they okay with you making money off of them, but not for them? Syriza growled in frustration, but reluctantly put her knife away and backed off. Fine, the halfling gets to walk away from this one. Now hand me the sloth. Artemis grinned. It's an anteater, actually, and he threw his backpack to the side, to the heavily slanted section of the rooftop. The bag hit with a thud and started to slide down the gable. Syriza shouted a curse, rushed forward, and dove for the bag. She caught it and hugged it to her chest, but she couldn't stop herself from sliding, and went tumbling off the edge of the roof. Badger shook himself back to full awareness. Down below he heard Syriza give a shout, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting a pile of brush or straw. Hey, what's the big idea of falling in my wagon like that? Who the hells do you think you are? That guy's having a rough night. You okay? Artemis asked as he walked over. You look shapen up by that last hit. Badger, however, was livid. What the fuck was that, Black? You probably just killed one of the only golden anteaters outside of Chult. Do you have any idea how rare those things are? I don't know how rare they are, he said, unbuttoning his coat. But I know how rare they're going to be if this one craps on me. He pulled the coat away to reveal Dewey, clinging onto the left side of his pale blue shirt. The little anteater spared a glance for Badger and licked the air in response. Dewey, come here, little buddy, exclaimed Badger, and he carefully pulled him free of Artemis's shirt. He hugged Dewey close, and the baby anteater clung to his front instinctively. I notice he isn't squirming around and making a bunch of noise anymore, Artemis observed. Yeah, I guess putting him in a cage was really jarring for a trade-dwelling animal, but he seems way happier now that he can hold on to something. A thought occurred to Badger, and a grin split his face from ear to ear. He pulled Dewey off and held him up to Artemis, then bobbed him up and down in a talking sort of motion. What can I say, Uncle Artemis? I just wanted someone to hug, he said in a weird voice. I'm not interested in your hugs, but I will take my 150 dragons. What are you talking about? I only 120. No, you owe me 300, if you recall. And I'll be taking half of that right now, for turning our Johnny's goons onto me. Oh, come on, I didn't know our Johnny was in the city. Even so. Come on, Black. It's almost all the money I've got on me, and I've still got to pay a caravan to smuggle me to Neverwinter, and I need to buy food for Dewey. What do you mean you need to buy food for him? He's an anteater. Doesn't he eat, ants? Well, yeah, but I can't just carry ants around with me. I need to make a special formula for him, and the ingredients ain't cheap. That's too bad. Wait, formula? Like the kind you give babies? I have a bottle that I feed him with. You've bottle-fed a fucking anteater? You know what? Never mind. Just pay me. But we'll starve. Not my problem. He's just a baby. And he has a shitty father. Cough it up. Badger sighed, but untied the pouch on his belt and handed it over. Artemis immediately started counting the contents. You could at least let me keep enough to eat. Could. Won't. You've turned into a real ass, you know that. No, I'm just wise to your... Artemis suddenly stumbled and fell over, spilling the coins across the roof. Badger rushed to catch him, and Artemis screamed at his touch. Artemis's right side was warm and wet. When Badger pulled the coat away, he saw that it was soaked in blood, with the broken remains of a wooden shaft protruding slightly. When had he... Syriza's crossbow bolt. This wound looks bad. You didn't do yourself any favors by running around with it either, he said, draping Artemis's arm over his neck. Come on, we need to get you to a healer. Too far. There aren't any healers in this part of the city. Find a doctor or something, just so. They're on the Zent's payroll. Take me to one of the usual places. Right now, Johnny will find me in no time. Well, we have to do something fast. God's Black, the way you're bleeding, Johnny's not going to get the chance. I have a place I can go, but we're going to have to swing by somewhere on the way. Chapter 3. Emelia. The lateness of the hour. But while Miss Crane's line work, composition, and lighting are all testament to her undeniable talent, she continues to be hindered by her, quite frankly, dogmatic insistence on unorthodox angels and an entirely unnecessary amount of color. It is this critic's sincere hope that Miss Crane will, in time, learn to restrain her more singular tendencies and fully realize the greater success which would no doubt await her. "Thanks a lot, Mr. Uvieri of the Waterdhavian Chronicle," Emelia said, folding the newspaper in half and setting it to the side. "You mule-faced jerk." She downed the last sip of her sweet golden wine, then reached for the bottle, only to find it empty. This night just gets better and better. Another exhibition, another one of her paintings entered, another chance for people not to buy it, and another chance for supposed authorities like Uvieri to tear it apart, without ever having held a brush themselves. Yep, the life of an inspiring Waterdhavian artist was a thing of true enchantment. Preening, vapid, self-absorbed enchantment. Artemis had been right about that. He had been right about a lot of things. Oh yeah, you're drunk. On a waves day, middle of the week, and you're at home, alone, drunk, again. Way to go, Emma. Give yourself a fucking hand. She did a mocking little applaud, dragged her hands down her face in exasperation, then looked up at the mantel above the fireplace, where sat a silver harp-shaped pin within a display box. Roland. He had loved that pin. She had loved him because he had loved that pin. She had always wanted to do a portrait of him wearing it, but he had always insisted that it was too risky. Bad enough that harpers had to wear the things during missions. He didn't need to advertise it any more than that. She stood up and walked over to it. But of course, that hadn't kept him out of danger. It hadn't stopped that Shadovar from plunging a dagger in his side. It hadn't stopped the poison from spreading. It hadn't even brought his body back home to her. Just his pin. Like a sword without its master, a dog without its owner. Fitting, in a way, the harpers had been his life, and they had ultimately been his death. She picked up the small box and stared at the pin within, her image reflected in the glass. "I hate you. He's dead because of you." The words hung in the air like a spectre. She felt hot tears rolling down her cheeks, saw them dripping onto the case. She hugged it tightly and let the grief hit her again, like a wave crashing against the shore. "I miss you. So much. Gods, you're useless when you're like this." She looked around the living room, at the sofas with their maroon pillows, at the stone floor with its circular pattern of black and white, at the walls where hung works by far better artists than her. "How far you've come, from dock to castle in just 5 years. You're making it, girl. The old gang would be proud. But in the end, what was the point? What was the point of any of it, if this is how it ends?" There suddenly came a loud, frantic knock on the door. She looked at the clock. Who on Faerun could be visiting at this hour? She put the pin back on the shelf, grabbed the umbrella she kept by the door in case it was someone looking to get fresh, and threw the door open, finally ending the pounding. Artemis was standing there with a weary smile, one of his arms draped over the neck of a rail-thin young woman with a narrow face and large spectacles, the other over the neck of a halfling with a... Was that a lemur holding onto his shirt? "Hey, Emma. Long time no see." "You asshole." "You're damn right, and long time no see. 3 years, 3 years, and not a word from you. Not a visit, not a sending, not so much as a letter. Last I knew, you had a bounty on your head from, of all people, Draven Brightwater. And I only heard about that because I read the morning edition. Just what do you have to say for yourself, Artemis Black?" He responded by nearly collapsing, his companion straining under his weight. Emelia only then noticed just how pale he was, how weak-looking, and he was... bleeding? "I'm sorry, but we have to get him inside," the woman said, shifting her shoulders. Of course. Come in, hurry." "Ain't that just his way?" said the halfling as he helped carry. "Guys play dead for years, only to show up on your doorstep when he's actually dying." They rushed inside and laid Artemis down on the floor, then removed his coat to reveal a pale blue shirt now ruined on one side by blood and a broken quarrel. "Watching gods," Emelia said under her breath as the woman ripped off the shirt. Artemis was groaning in pain as she did.
That was my favorite shirt,
he said in labored breaths. The wound underneath was a bloody mess. The head of the arrow, or bolt, or whatever was still lodged in, but it was the location of the hit that was most distressing. "There's too much blood for a wound like this. We have to get the bolt head out of him," shouted the woman, who started fishing through the pack she had been carrying. "Artemis," Emelia said, leaning in close to him. "What happened to you? Who are these people?"
"Oh, right, sorry. Let me introduce you. Emelia Crane. This is my acquaintance, Badger Trufflestuff."
"At your service," the halfling said, taking a deep bow.
"And this little bookworm."
"Lynette Hushman," replied the woman, pulling out a number of instruments from her pack. "Emelia Crane, as in the painter?"
Yes."
"My girlfriend's a big fan," she said.
Thank you. "I ran into trouble a little earlier with some disreputable folks," Artemis continued. "They thought I looked better with an arrow in my torso, and I respectfully disagreed. They won that argument."
"But I don't understand. Why didn't you go to a doctor, or—"
"Not an option, unfortunately," Badger said, pacing slowly around, taking in the room. "The Zants are covering half the doctors in the city, Temples too, so we had to come here. I have to say, pretty swanky digs to bite it in." The terror on her face must have been evident, or maybe the pain was just so intense, because Artemis reached over and squeezed her hand. "Hey, it's all right. I'm in good hands. I trust these people with my life. But you may want to keep an eye on your silverware while Badger's here." "I heard that, you shiftless dice boy." "Good. I meant for you too, you conniving runt."
"I'm going to have to make an incision to widen the wound," Lynette said, pulling out a scalpel. "Do you have anything to bite down on?"
"Wait," Emelia exclaimed.
"Aren't you going to give him something for the pain? Anesthesia or something?" "I'm afraid I don't have anything like that," she replied, and produced a small black object from the pack, just shy of a woman's balled fist. "Here, hold this."
Emelia took the thing and looked it over. At first she thought it was a rock, given its color and hardness, but looking at its shriveled texture, she ultimately judged it was some sort of large dried fruit, like a raisin of extraordinary size.
"What sort of doctor doesn't have any painkillers? Not even dream lily or poppy oil? What about soft goodbye?" "Well, you see—"
"Lynette isn't exactly what you might call a doctor, but don't worry, she's got the heart of a surgeon."
"And, more importantly, the head of one."
"Wait, these are some pretty nice paintings. You do all these?" asked Badger, standing on an ottoman to get a better look at one.
No, not all of them. That one is actually by a famous—"
"Neato," he said, hopping down and examining something else.
"Ah, here we are," Lynette said, and pulled from her bag a severed human head. "Sweet baby Lathander, what is that?"
Lynette looked at her with a puzzled expression.
"I told you," she said, holding up the head like some sort of macabre trophy. "I have the head of a surgeon. And his heart."
Emelia looked down at the desiccated lump in her hand, then shrieked in horror and let it drop.
"Who in all that is holy are you, lady? And how do you know her?" "I'm Lynette Hushman," she said, adjusting her glasses, "and I'm an assistant coroner of Waterdeep."
Chapter 4. Lynette. The Death of Artemis Black. "Yeah, that's him all right," Hargreaves said, staring down at the corpse. "That's the son of a bitch." Lynette jotted down information into her records. Inventory number 10514. Name Black Artemis. Species human, Titharian.
"And how did you say he died?" Cora asked.
"Yes, that's something I'd like to know as well," Hargreaves said, turning to her subordinates. "Go over it again." "Well, we spotted him coming out of a bookstore in Trade Ward," the snowy white dragonborn began. "So we decided to chase him."
"We pursued him for about 10 minutes, frightened a few people, knocked over some vegetable stands. Nothing too unusual for this sort of thing," purred the tabaxi, walking a coin across her hand.
And wouldn't you know it, said the bare-chested man with porcelain skin and faintly luminous golden eyes, the sweet boy just keels over and collapses, grabbed that handsome chest of his at the end. By the time we figured out he wasn't bluffing, the poor dear was dead. Sex, male. Height, 5 foot 8 inches. Weight, 175 pounds. He didn't say or shout anything strange, make any sort of comment about what was happening or how he was feeling? Cora asked. The only reply that came was a nonchalant shrug from the half-elf. Lynette couldn't help but wonder why that lady insisted on keeping up her mime routine during this whole interview. And he didn't receive any injuries prior to that? Blows to the head, spells, anything like that?
We didn't so much as scratch him. Well, maybe a few scratches.
It's nothing he hasn't dealt with before, the Dragonborn replied.
And you're sure he wasn't subjected to any poisons or anything of that nature?
Heavens no, darling, as if we'd use such a vulgar tactic as that, replied the half-naked man with an angelic cast to his appearance. Hair, black. Eyes, hazel. Estimated age, 24 years old.
Guess you'll have to actually do your job,
Hargreaves said, hoisting the halberd she walked in with onto one shoulder. How long before you can ascertain a cause of death?
I'm not so sure.
Then make a guess.
I can't even begin to do that. Look, we're backed up as it is. Our boss is out with shaking fever and...
I'm not interested in your excuses. I'm interested in my bounty. Until we have all the paperwork sorted out and all the questions answered, I and my squad don't get paid.
Just ignore it. Don't worry about it. Just keep writing. Don't make a scene. Don't let them all see how pathetic you are. Don't let Cora see.
I'm sorry, but you'll just have to wait. No, I won't. Ivory, get his head. That should be proof enough for the desk jockeys at the Treasury. You can't do that, Cora shouted and moved in between the Dragonborn and the body. She's so fearless. You can't just go hacking up bodies before we found a cause of death. What if it was something in his head? I find that hard to believe. The only thing that loser ever had in his head was money, con jobs, and new and effective ways to piss me off. Hargreaves retorted, poison in her words.
I didn't think he was so terrible,
the Tabaxi snickered, amused by her captain's hostility. Oh, don't mind her, Purloin, said the golden-eyed man. She's just being harsh because he was a rat-eating degenerate and a scam artist, snapped Hargreaves. He's been nothing but a thorn in my side for years, but that ends now. If you can't figure out how long it will take to do your thrice-damned job, then we're...
Be brave, like Cora.
Tomorrow, Lynette said suddenly, looking up from her notes. All the eyes in the room turned to her. She nearly died.
I could stay overnight and perform the autopsy. I know you have plans tonight, Cora, but I'm free. I should have the, results by tomorrow, hopefully.
Oh, Lynn, Cora said with a frown, don't do that. This old battle-axe can wait like every... See that it gets done, Hargreaves said with her typical imperious tone. Contact me when you have the results. Adonis, give her your sending stone. The shirtless man reached into the pockets of his baggy pantaloons, then started feeling around in his belt pouches. There seems to be a small problem. It would appear as though I've lost the thing. You lost your stone? His captain sneered. Fine. I'll be back at noon for my results. Or my head. Let's go, Epsilon Squad. The 4 others, Mime, Tabaxi, Dragonborn, and Shirtless Man, followed her out in silence. Lynette felt a weight lift off her shoulders and promptly land on her chest as Cora turned to her. You didn't have to do that.
It's fine. I'll be fine. This way you can keep your plans, and we won't get in trouble.
Yeah, I guess Dr. Fowler would be pretty angry if he just let people come in here and start chopping bodies up. You might say he'd lose his head? Eh? She said, playfully elbowing Lynette, who, for her part, couldn't help but laugh at her joke, bad as it was.
Tell her she's funny. Tell her, 9 damn you.
You sure you'll be fine here alone? Cora asked, slipping on her coat.
Yes. Thanks for asking, though.
No problem. Look, don't push yourself too hard, okay, Lynn? You pull these all-nighters more and more these days. If you don't take care of yourself, you're bound to get sick.
I'll be okay. You don't have to worry. She worries about me?
I'll be here bright and early to relieve you.
Sounds great,
she said, with too much excitement.
See you then, buddy. Buddy, are you serious?
Cora gave her a parting smile, and Lynette felt her heart stop, then just waved her goodbye. And she was still waving goodbye after Cora had gone all the way down the street, and after she turned the corner.
Well, you screwed that one up, again. Is it any wonder why she worries about you when you're such a complete spaz?
She sighed and went back inside, grabbed a cup of coffee from the pot, and after several minutes, when she was quite sure she was all alone, went to her locker. She got her spare bag from the hook inside, then reached down and pulled up the locker's floor. She had really lucked out when she had discovered it was loose, because the space underneath had turned out to be an excellent place to hide her books. She gingerly pulled them out, one at a time, as if handling delicate pieces of crystal, then brought the whole lot over to one of the operating tables. Just one thing left. She needed her helper. She opened the basement door and gave a little whistle from the top of the stairs.
Patches! You down here, pal? Here, kitty, kitty, kitty.
There was a rustling of boxes, and Lynette's light caught a pair of mismatched eyes. The cat cocked its head, dropped the mouse it was holding, and gave a slow meow.
Well, don't just stand there, you bum. Come here. I haven't seen you all day.
Patches gave another placid meow and trotted up the stairs, following her back into the morgue. As she spread her trio of books out on the table, he hopped up to greet her, plopping down with a kind of disinterested exhaustion right on top of her copy of Commentaries on Evard.
Now, what if I was going to read that one?
Meow. She smiled and rubbed him behind his ears, then opened up Mysteries in Sinew and delicately turned to the page she needed. She needed to be careful. Not only were these books vital to her research, but she knew she'd play hell in trying to replace any of them should they get damaged. Was there even a way to get a copy of Key of Black Truth that wouldn't get you thrown in jail? Ah, here it was, the list. She rummaged through her bag for the ingredients as she read them off.
Let's see. Ounce of bone powder, check. Shavings of silver, check. Quill and ink, check. Night opal? Don't need it because I have the candle. And everything else? Yeah, I can just get that from the body. It's a...
There suddenly came a tapping sound. A hollow, metallic tapping. Where was it coming from?
Do you hear that too, Patches?
Patches lazily rolled onto his side. She listened carefully, trying to determine the source. Slowly, she felt her hand searching for one of the scalpels. It was cold and, unsurprisingly, of practically no comfort. Could the tapping be from something normal? A sound in the pipes or something? Water dripping inside the walls? Was that it? No, it had a pattern, and it was coming from one of the corpse drawers.
Oh, that's not good. Definitely not good.
She gripped the scalpel tightly and inched her ways towards the drawer. The tapping was getting faster, more forceful.
It's not a zombie. It can't be a zombie. How could it be a zombie? Corpses don't just spontaneously reanimate, typically. Could it be from my experiments? Impossible. I checked all the spells before I used any of them. No, I double-checked them. I used all the right components, said all the right words, didn't take any shortcuts, except for that one time. And that other one. But still, there's no way it's a zombie.
The thing, or force, or whatever it was inside the drawer, suddenly banged, loudly, within its prison and gave a low, disquieting moan.
Okay, it's a zombie. You ate a zombie, on accident. Unless it's a ghoul. Is it a ghoul? What if it's a ghoul? Could I bind it? No, don't have the components. Can't catch it either. Might have to use a scalpel. Aw, but then I'd have to hurt the poor thing. Please, please, please don't be a ghoul.
She grabbed the drawer's handle and gave a hard pull.
Wait, what am I talking about? I don't know how to knife fight.
The body on the slab was motionless until it let out an anguished groan and opened its eyes.
Badger, you jackass. How long's this stuff last?
Lynette screamed and raised her weapon for a downward stab, but in her panic she flung the scalpel into the air and heard it stick into the ceiling with a slight thud.
Vampire!
Please don't scream like that,
the vampire groaned.
I've got enough of a headache as it is."
That was an odd thing for a vampire to say.
Lynette caught her breath and calmed down a bit.
You're the guy we received earlier. 10514?
Indeed I am. Good old 10514. It was my mother's maiden name, but it doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, so my friends just call me Artemis. Forgive my manners. I'd normally kiss your hand at this point, but, as you can see, and he tapped his left index finger against the bottom of the drawer, though with great difficulty, I'm having a sort of off day.
You're alive.
Drowsy, paralyzed, splitting headache, but yes, it would appear so.
But we checked your pulse, your breathing, painful stimuli. You never even twitched.
That would be the paralysis, my dear. Kiss of Loath, more commonly referred to simply as drow poison, to be precise, creates an almost death-like state of paralysis. Badger said they make it from some sort of rare spider or some such thing.
So those forced gray guys did poison you.
What? No, I did this to myself.
You used drow poison on yourself?
To fake my own death. There's quite a few people in this city who are none too happy with me, so I thought I'd try wiping the slate. I took the poison right before I showed myself to Hargreaves' little band of misfits.
And then led them on a chase through town, both to get the poison circulating through your body and to make a big spectacle.
He either smiled at her observation, or most of the muscles in his face spasmed at once. It was sort of hard to tell. Bingo, now you're getting it.
You know that Hargreaves lady really doesn't like you.
Things are complicated between us.
She was going to chop your head off.
Yeah, I hadn't planned on that. Fortunately, you talked her out of it. I reckon I owe you big time now.
You heard all that?
I was paralyzed, dear, not deaf.
So, what now?
Well, I figured I'd just wait for the poison to wear off, he said, and slowly lifted his arms, testing the limits of his movement. And then I'd just get up and walk out. Truth be told, I hadn't planned on the stuff lasting so long or running into anyone while I did so, a cute girl least of all.
Lynette turned scarlet at the remark. Artemis arched an eyebrow.
You're just saying that, about being cute.
Me? Lie to a knife-throwing young lady while paralyzed and helpless on a table in a morgue when I'm already supposed to be dead? Perish the thought. What, are you not used to people calling you cute?
I'm not used to people noticing me in general.
Not even a certain blonde coworker?
How do you...
Not deaf, just stuck, he said, slowly rotating his left arm, trying to get feeling back in it.
Well, then you also heard that we'll get in trouble if this place isn't kept in proper working order.
Have you tried talking to her?
What?
The blonde. What was it again? Cora, have you tried talking to her?
That has nothing to do with this.
True, but I figure since I'm stuck here, and your plans are, hopefully, shot,
and he rotated his left shoulder, trying to get feeling back in that side,
we might as well talk about something, and your love life is the most interesting thing on the table at the moment.
He was able to lift his head slightly and look himself over.
Well, tied for most interesting.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, come on, bookworm. Don't tell me your mother never sat you down and told you about the hippogriffs and the owlbears.
I know what you mean. It's just, I don't have a love life.
Which is simply tragic because you are, again, very cute. Play your cards right, and I bet you'd even be able to turn Cora's head.
I'm not in love with Cora.
He gave her a skeptical look.
What the heck is this? You don't know anything about me or my life. You don't even know my name, so where do you get off trying to give me advice?
She turned away from him, and the room fell silent for a long moment.
It's Lynette. My name is Lynette Hushman.
It's a pleasure, Miss Hushman, and I'm sorry for prying.
There suddenly came a soft thud, followed by a low meow.
Is that a cat? I love cats. I find we have highly compatible personalities. Here, kitty, kitty, kitty.
Lynette smiled to herself, only to be immediately overcome with dread. She spun, terrified, and called out, but it was too late. Patches was hopping up onto the drawer with Artemis.
I didn't know you could bring a cat to a mug. What the fuck?
Apparently Artemis had regained enough of his mobility that he was able to flail the left side of his body in horror, but without full control the motion caused him to go tumbling to the floor, face first and screaming. She rushed to help him, but couldn't do much what with him thrashing about like he was. "Agma, Mistra, and Las Dania," he swore. She finally settled for grabbing his coat at the shoulders, pulling him over to the wall, and propping him up as best she could.
"Artemis, calm down. Just relax."
That cat, it's not right." She looked up at patches on the drawer, yawning and curling back up into a lazy ball of tabby gray and black, white and orange, solid black, and about 2 other coat types she'd used when sewing him together. He blinked with his mismatched eyes, first his green, then his blue.
"Now I know what it looks like," she began.
"It looks like a monster. How are you not more concerned with this?" As if to answer his own question, his head suddenly darted to the operating table with its trio of ominous-looking black books and collection of spell components. "You're a necromancer," he said, with a little too unease in his voice.
"In training," she said sheepishly.
So that's why you agreed to stay behind and do a full autopsy by yourself, so you could turn me into a zombie?"
"Well, not exactly. I only know a few basic spells, minor ones really, but I know enough to get a corpse to answer a few questions for me, narrow down the possible causes. It really speeds things up. Then I can use the rest of the evening to run some tests, take some samples."
"Unleash hordes of undead upon the world of the living?"
"What? No, I'd take all sorts of precautions. It's not like I'm doing anything that's dangerous."
"Nothing dangerous? You made a goddamn zombie!" That sparked something within her. She furrowed her brow and held the undead cat up to him.
"Are you serious? What could possibly be dangerous about Patches here?"
He gave a slow meow. One of his back legs fell off, its stitching having come undone. It was a sight so utterly pitiful that Artemis laughed in spite of himself. Lynette blushed and brought Patches, along with his severed leg, back over to the operating table, collecting her books and components back into the satchel.
"Guess I won't be needing any of this stuff anyway. Come on, pal, let's fix you up."
"So he's not ravenous from an insatiable hunger for living flesh?" Artemis asked from across the room, weakly trying and failing to stand.
"Well, he eats mice, or at least he hunts mice, and sort of chews on them. But he doesn't really pay much mind for anything else. He comes when I call and sort of purrs, I think, when I scratch him. It's almost like he remembers being a living cat."
"And that isn't concerning? A mockery of life?"
"Quite the opposite. It's absolutely fascinating."
"Bookworm, you got a weird sense of wonder."
"No, but think about it. Patches is a zombie, just a corpse that's been animated using negative energy. In theory, he should be totally mindless, but he's not. It means there are things about cats which are retained, even when those cats are powered by negative energy rather than positive. That's its core, its essence, the fundamental aspects of a cat, whatever its animating force. What you call a mockery of life, I call a celebration of existence."
"But it's unnatural. It defies the—"
"Oh, don't hand me all that nonsense like you're some doom guide. There is absolutely nothing unnatural about any of this. Necromancy uses the weave like any other magic. It's innate, woven into the fabric of magic and the world itself. It's every bit as natural as conjuring a ball of fire from thin air or turning a man into a frog, and most of it is significantly less cruel, but because people are creeped out by anything that reminds them they're mortal, we just label it as evil and unnatural and wrong and just throw it all out whole cloth. Let's not study it. Let's not understand it. Forget about all the good it might do, all the lives we might be able to save or extend if we learn how to properly channel vital energies, all the pain that can be eased, all the possibilities that might await us. And sure, there are risks, and maybe those possibilities don't exist. Maybe it'd all be one colossal waste of time and effort, but if we don't try, or even so much as ask, how do we ever learn, grow? How do we—"
She put the final touches on Patches and suddenly realized she had been rambling. Her face turned scarlet, and she glanced over to the strange, previously dead man, who sat on the floor, looking at her with the most curious grin on his face that she'd ever seen.
You think I'm crazy, don't you? I sound crazy right now."
"Well, truth be told, what I think hardly matters. I mean, I didn't even understand half of what you were saying just now, but it seems to me that you're the type of person who looks out into the world, is smart enough to see just how big it is, and is also honest enough to admit just how little of it she actually understands.
That doesn't strike me as crazy. It strikes me as brave.
You're just saying that because you're stuck here.
He chuckled and, using the wall to support himself, rose on trembling legs. Have you ever talked like that around Cora?
What?
I bet she'd find it cute.
Why are you back to this all of a sudden?
No, scratch that. I bet she'd find it adorable.
You said you wouldn't pry.
I lied. I do that on occasion. Should I take that as a no?
Why am I even talking to you about this?
Because you clearly haven't talked about it with her.
There's nothing to talk about.
I don't believe that.
There really isn't.
I bet she'd be flattered, surprised even.
No, she wouldn't.
Perhaps, who knows, interested?
No, she wouldn't.
Why?
Because why would she?
Lynette snapped, slamming her fists onto the operating table. Patches looked up at her blankly.
Cora is pretty and fun and outgoing, and I'm just... me.
She heard of the creak of his shoes as he walked over and stood across the table from her, leaning on it for support. Bookworm, you brought the captain of a force-grade squad to heel. You've got a stash of illegal manuals on necromancy stuffed in your backpack, and you spend your evenings reanimating corpses and fixing the stitchings on your zombie cat. There's nothing just about you.
She could have anyone. Why would she ever want me?
He reached over and put his hands on hers. She looked over at him, at those hazel eyes with their inscrutable twinkle. Someone much smarter than me once said, sure, there are risks. Maybe those possibilities don't exist. Maybe it all will be one colossal waste of time. But if we don't try, or even so much as ask, how do we ever learn or grow? Her own words resounded in her head.
You really are a spaz, aren't you?
She felt herself smile. Suddenly a loud bang echoed through the morgue. What the hells was that? Artemis asked, startled by the noise.
It came from the back door. Maybe Cora forgot something after all?
There was a second bang, followed by the sound of the back door bursting open. There came a high, nasally voice and the sound of footsteps.
Knock, knock. Anybody home? We saw the light on and decided to drop by.
Okay, that's not Cora.
Lynette looked over to Artemis, his eyes wide with both fear and understanding.
Do you know who that is?
Unfortunately.
What do they want?
Nothing good. Look, stall them as long as you can. I have an idea. She felt her stomach tighten and the hair on the back of her neck stand on end, but she gave him a slight nod and went to investigate.
Brave face, keep it together.
She met them as they were coming through one of the supply rooms. A tiny man, a gnome she realized when she got a better look at him, in a crimson coat with black fur trim and a floppy feathered hat, along with a pair of burly half-orcs in leather armor.
Is there something I can help you with?
That depends, doll. You the undertaker here?
I'm the acting coroner, yes.
Then you're just the person I wanted to see. Why don't you show us where you keep the stiffs in this joint?
I'm afraid the morgue's not open to the general public.
Oh, we're not the public. We're a couple of private citizens looking to mourn one of our fellows.
Even so, I'll have to ask you to leave.
He chuckled, then reached into his coat and produced a hand crossbow.
Toots, you can ask all you want, but I don't think you're going to like my answer.
She gulped and tensed.
This was a stupid idea. Right this way, then. Artemis, I really hope you have a plan.
She led them back into the morgue. Artemis was gone, as was her bag.
No.
All right, then, here's the deal. A dear friend of ours, Jackie Three Thumbs, well, he up and died not too long ago.
I'm sorry to hear that. He didn't leave. Wouldn't leave.
Don't be. Jackie was a moron, a real numbskull, and a stoolie to boot. Nah, Jackie got what was coming to him, but you see, it just so happened that old Jackie boy was in possession of some merchandise of mine when he bid it. Diamonds, to be precise.
I can assure you nothing like that has come through here. Just stall for time, like you said.
Ah, but that's where you're wrong, doll. They did come through here, 'cause Jackie came through here, 'cause in order to hide those little jewels from any nosy watch types, old Jackie boy up and swallowed them.
He swallowed diamonds?
Like I said, none too bright that Jackie Three Thumbs. But hey, as long as I get what's mine, who am I to argue the guy's methods, eh?
I wouldn't be surprised if swallowing those diamonds is what got him killed, what with the internal lacerations and...
Ha! Wouldn't that just be a hoot? The gnome laughed. And fitting, too. But one way or another, I need those diamonds. That's where you come in, doll.
You want me to dissect his corpse and find the diamonds in his intestines?
Well, look at that. Cute and smart.
There was a slight pause, as if he was waiting for something. Suddenly, one of the half-orcs grunted.
Mr. Weaseltooth gave you a compliment.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now then, doll, why don't you get to slicing?
But I don't even know who this guy is.
Don't worry, we'll point him out to you.
There's no telling where in his digestive tract those diamonds could be.
Then I guess you'll just have to search it all.
This is bad. Where is he? It's just...
The gnome, Weaseltooth, motioned towards her with his head. One of the half-orcs walked forward and clamped his massive hand around her arm.
Mr. Weaseltooth isn't in the habit of repeating himself. Let's find Jackie, shall we?
You're hurting me.
He dragged her, forcefully, over to the drawers and started pulling them out one by one. She struggled to get free, but his grip was like a vice. It just so happened that this Jackie Three Thumbs was being kept in the drawer next to Artemis's.
He's not coming, is he?
The brute practically slammed her against the shelf as Weaseltooth and his other flunky came over to inspect.
Yep, that's Jackie, all right. Time to do your thing, Toots.
You heard the man.
And if you do a good job, the gnome added, you might just walk out of here without getting hurt. Too bad.
He left me.
If there is one thing I simply cannot abide, it's a man who doesn't know how to treat a lady. The whole room turned. There, in the main door to the morgue, was Artemis, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed.
Well, 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 look what the oat you coughed up. Artemis Black. Word on the street is you died. What are you supposed to be, a ghost or something?
Come on, Benny. You know there's no such thing as ghosts.
Oh, good, that's good. 'Cause Shark was real upset when he heard the news. What with all that money he says you owe him.
Tell Shark I'll get his 500 dragons.
Tell him yourself. I'm not interested in you right now, Black, so I'm letting you off the hook. Get out of here and keep your trap shut.
Counter offer. You and your goons clear out right now, and you won't get mixed up in what's coming. What do you say, button nose? Lynette saw the gnome's eyes grow wide, his upper lip curl. He spun back to Artemis and leveled the crossbow at him.
You know something, Black? You got a big mouth.
And you have a little nose. He sneered at Artemis.
I think it's time someone shut you up for good.
Artemis kicked the door to the morgue hard, and it slammed into the wall with a loud bang. The move startled the gnome, but it didn't quell his ire. He pointed the crossbow square at Artemis's head. There was a flash of silver as something dropped from the ceiling and sliced Weaseltooth's hand as it fell. Her scalpel! Benny hissed in pain and dropped the weapon, clutching his bleeding hand.
The fuck was that? Rocco? Heathcliff? Show Dice Boy here what happens when you go poking your nose where it don't belong.
The half-orcs each cracked their knuckles and started approaching. Artemis just stood there, examining the nails on his left hand, while fishing for something in his pocket with the right. You're gonna wish you had left when I gave you the chance, Artemis said to the thugs, 'cause I've got something here that's about to seriously ruin your evening. Oh, yeah? Rumbled one of the bruisers as he towered over Artemis. And what is that? He grinned, and something about it put Lynette's mind at ease, though she couldn't quite explain what. He pulled out his hand and revealed a small, mostly flat stone, embedded with a well-cut turquoise in its center. It looked almost like a sending stone. Suddenly, a thunderous bang ripped through the entire structure, as Lynette heard multiple someones, come bursting through what she suspected was the front door. Then a woman called out, her voice imperious and wrathful, like the roar of an angry god. "Black!" she heard Captain Hargreaves shout. Panic swept over Weaseltooth's face.
You fucking rat! You called Force Grey down on us?
Well, mostly me. You're just collateral damage.
You're fucking daffy. Come on, boys, let's get out of here.
The three criminals headed back the way they had come, towards the supply room, only to be cut off by a leather-clad tabaxi and that blasted lady mime.
Freeze! Nobody move.
The mime held up her hand, palm out front, in a stop sort of motion. Artemis, however, casually strolled over to Lynette, counting down on his fingers. It was almost surreal watching him, here, amidst armed criminals who tried to shoot him, government-sanctioned mercenaries who wanted to arrest him, against a backdrop of dead bodies and reanimated cats. Artemis Black seemed as calm and serene as any saint. It wasn't that he didn't have any fear. She knew better than that. Rather, it was like he somehow knew what was about to happen, like he could read every move and devise a counter to it, before it was even made. Faking his death, stealing the sending stone, timing the fall of the scalpel. He had planned for it all.
The man's a genius.
I stuffed your bag and your pet in your locker. You might want to be careful opening it up, he whispered to her.
I will, thank you.
The banging from up front got much closer.
So what's next? How can I help?
The door to the morgue flew open as Hargreaves stormed in, her eyes aflame, her pale gold hair disheveled. The angelic-looking man, Adonis, followed her in, along with Ivori, the dragonborn.
You fucking snake! I knew you were up to something.
Hello to you too, Apollonia. I see you got my sendings. Tell me, did you run halfway across Castlewood, or did you just have Josette teleport you?
Don't try and talk your way out of this one.
Hey, said Ivori, pointing over to where the other Force Grey members had pinned their marks. Isn't that Benny Weaseltooth? Why, it sure is. Adorable little button-nosed Benny in the flesh. Adonis chuckled over the gnome's insistence that his nose wasn't that small. He's got, 150 dragons on his head?
They're small fry. Pay attention to the big fish, Hargreaves snapped. Artemis Black, under the authority vested in me by the Open Lord of Waterdeep, I hereby bind and detain you on charges of larceny, fraud, destruction of public and private property, disturbing the peace.
No, but seriously, Lynette whispered frantically. What's your plan now?
Plan? Assault, extortion, falsifying government records, counterfeiting.
Yeah, how are you going to turn this around? What's the secret? Did you rig something to fall? Did you put oil or glue on the floor somewhere? Are one of these guys actually working for you?
Theft of a yacht, theft of a non-yacht, spice trafficking, grand theft palomino. Honestly, I was just going to let them take me and figure out what to do from there. Use an opening when one presents itself or something. Tax evasion, grave robbing, teaching bears to gamble.
Wait, you're improvising?
Meh, it's like 50-50. Illegal possession of historical artifacts. What, are you going to tell me Mama's need all that jewelry? He asked with a grin. Possession with intent to distribute aquatic rodents. For the last time they were otters, and I was holding them for a friend. Indecent exposure with an ostrich. We do not talk about that. And being an overall pain in my ass, you son of a bitch. Hey, don't talk about our mother that way.
Wait, Lynette said, turning to look him in the eye. Did you say our mother? You mean she's your...
Lynette Hushman, me Apollonia Hargreaves, my oldest sister. Half-sister, you drum alley piece of trash! Lynette just looked at him with the most puzzled look on her face.
This guy is insane.
Chapter 5. Emelia. Dandelions. It had been 3 years since Emma Beddoes, now Emelia Crane, had seen her old friend Artemis. And yet, in the 15 minutes since their reunion, her lovely stone foyer had been drenched in blood, his torso had been surgically cut open, while he was still conscious. The assistant coroner of Waterdeep had reanimated a severed human head, and was now holding it over the wound so it could see, and was talking to it. And now Emma was forced to keep a tight grip on its desiccated heart, because otherwise there was no way to ensure that the head didn't just lie to them. All while a shady halfling with an anteater on his back was, she was pretty sure, using her shower even though he had said he just needed to use the toilet. This was not how she had planned on spending her Waves-Day night. "As you can see, the arrow was able to penetrate deeply and rupture the kidney," the head said. "This accounts for the unusual amount of blood, despite the bolt not being removed."
"You were lucky, Artemis. Just an inch or so to the side, and you'd be looking at a severed artery."
The woman, Lynette, she had called herself, added.
Lucky me."
"He's losing a lot of blood," Emelia said, trying not to let her voice tremble. "You need to patch him up." Both Lynette and the head exchanged a worried glance.
I'm afraid it's not that simple, Miss Crane."
"Thanks to these silly biddies running around, the arrow was able to lacerate the organ beyond repair."
"If he's going to have any shot at seeing the sunrise, we're going to have to remove it."
She heard him give a long, low sob and a weak plea that she couldn't make out. You can't. He needs anesthesia. He needs a doctor. Forget about the Zents or whatever. He's dying right now." "If our Johnny finds him," said Badger, finally coming out of the bathroom, drying off his hair, the anteater still clinging to his back, "he'll wish he had died right now. Dreadwing's not the kind of guy to just take an eye for an eye. He'll make it last days if he can."
"What sort of people have you gotten yourself mixed up with, Artemis?"
"She is, however, not wrong. The shock of removing the organ will undoubtedly kill him. My best recommendation is to put an end to—"
"We're not doing that,"
Lynette snapped, flipping through a black leather-bound book she had brought with her. She found the page she was looking for and ran her finger along the text.
Artemis, Artemis, can you hear me?"
"Bookworm, when did you get here?"
"Artemis, listen, I think I know a way to help you, but you need to stay strong, understand? I need you to hang on."
"Did you bring that cat? I bet Fiona will get a kick out of it."
She could see the young necromancer was choking back tears. She forced herself to stay focused, then placed her hand to the wound and started saying something in a language Emelia didn't understand. She watched as the flesh around the wound began to blacken and die, slowly spreading out from underneath Lynette's hand.
"Wait, what are you doing? You're killing him!" "No, just the tissue around the kidney. I'm flooding it with negative energy so that it dies. Dead flesh means dead nerves, means no pain."
"Ah," said the head in surprise. "Very impressive thinking."
"I'll be able to cut away the tissue and remove the kidney. Afterward, his body should be able to recover on its own. But I might be able to infuse him with some positive energy to jumpstart it. You'll have to be careful of infection, though."
Please tell me you've done this before."
"Once. With a seagull."
It had been nearly 10 days since that night, and despite Emelia's best efforts and Lynette's daily visits with fresh supplies that she was able to scrounge up, infection had taken hold. The wound, at least, was healing properly. He'd have a patch of discolored scar tissue, and he'd have no sensation on his right side, just below the ribs. And, of course, he'd be short a kidney. But otherwise, Lynette said, he should recover once the fever broke. And she was far, far too happy to report the removed kidney was indeed still squirming around the jar she had put it in after they realized their spell had animated it. This was all cold comfort for Emelia, who sat in a low back chair, an unread evening edition in her lap, silently wondering if she was about to lose her oldest friend. Artemis lay on the couch across from her, a cold rag on his brow, mumbling in his sleep. He seemed to do that a great deal. Had he always been that way, or was it the fever? Most of it was gibberish, or some sequence of groans which her admittedly overactive imagination might have mistaken for sentences. But some of it was quite clear. He muttered about ports and about snow. He cursed the rain and comforted ladies. Well, at least some things never change, she reckoned. He talked to his mother, dead these past 10 years, and to his father, who had both loved and forsaken him. He mumbled about Quinton, that old grifter, and about Calliope, whom she didn't know but was apparently quite stubborn. He haggled with merchants and argued with guards. He spoke of Badger and Ophelia, of our Johnny and Draven, and of Pip and Zoe and Gil and poor, poor Fitz, who Artemis had always blamed himself for. But, more than anything, he asked for forgiveness, and he asked to come home. She sighed and dragged her hands down her face. What a mess this all was.
It didn't matter if it was traveling the roads of the Sword Coast or sitting relatively well here in Castle. It seemed like both of them were just barely keeping it together. Talking zombie heads and murderous cutthroats, bottles of wine laying empty, a closet full of clothes that she still couldn't throw out, and the only thing in her apartment that didn't remind her of Roland was suffering right in front of her, and she couldn't do a damn thing to help. So maybe he did remind her of Roland in that regard. When did it all get like this? How did it get like this? She wished she could go back to when it was all so much simpler, so much easier. Except it had never been simple, and it certainly hadn't been easy. Her father had run off before she was born. Her mother had always hated her. If you wanted coin, you fell in with one of the gangs. If you wanted good coin, you painted yourself up and stood in the shadowed doorways along Pearl or Watermen, or, if you were really desperate, Ruffy. If you were lucky, you grew up certain that your destiny lay in the putrid darkness of the tannery, or on a trawler that might never come home, or breaking your backs on the docks, loading cargo onto the ships of so-called better men. And the Watch, they were the worst of all. But it hadn't all been bad. There had been good days, happy days even. She reached back and plucked one from her memory. I want to do something with colors, Emma said, staring out over the harbor, the sun beginning to grow low in the sky. Something with colors? Artemis asked, trying to thread the line through the tiny hook. What the heck does that mean? Well, it's just, everything around here is all brown or black or gray and stuff. There's nothing blue or green or pink or anything. So, when I grow up, whatever I do, I want to do it surrounded by colors, a whole bunch of colors. Well, that sounds silly, he replied, making a tiny knot with the catgut. Yeah, well, so's trying to catch fish without any bait. I'm not trying to catch fish, he said with a big grin. I'm going to catch treasure. Treasure? Here? Yeah, my mom told me that a long time ago a big storm came along and destroyed all the ships in the harbor, which means that all the treasure they were carrying just sank to the bottom, and I'm going to catch some. And he cast the fishing line with a wide fling. It landed with a little plunk, and he sat down next to her, letting his feet dangle off the back of the ship that they had snuck aboard. So, what kind of something did you have in mind? He asked after a pause. With colors, I mean. Well, I was thinking maybe I could have a flower shop, and I could fill it with flowers of every color. Red roses, blue sky bells, white moonglove, yellow dandelions. Dandelions aren't flowers, they're weeds. Shut up, they are not. R2. Are not. R2. Are not. Are not. R2. Emma shouted, then blushed when she realized what she'd said. She hated when he tricked her like that. She crossed her arms and turned her nose up proudly. Well, whatever they are, I'm going to sell them in my shop because I like them. You're the only one, he said, jiggling the rod in impatient frustration. Then that's just another reason they're like you. Like me? How am I anything like some ugly weed? Well, your head's so light that it would blow away in a strong wind like one. Did you just call me dumb? If you have to ask. Suddenly his fishing line grew taut and he lurched it slightly. He quickly rose to his feet, a giddy smile on his face, and frantically pulled at the rod. She jumped up with him and helped pull on the line, drawing it in. So dumb that I just snagged a chest full of... He gave a final hard tug and pulled up a hunk of sopping, muck-covered leather, a rotting old boot. He glanced over at Emma's face and scowled at the beaming smile he found there. He pulled the boot free of the hook, wincing slightly at the sensation of cold, reeking mud on his hands, then handed it to her. What's that for? Girls like shoes, don't they? He asked with a smirk. Here, take it. Ew, gross, no, she said, smacking it out of his hand. He laughed at her reaction, then threw the line back into the water. She watched the sky overhead slowly turning purple as evening approached, then looked around at the muddy boot haphazardly cast aside on the deck of the ship. Are you sure Mr. Rothman is okay with us fishing on the boat like this? I thought nobles didn't like people on their boats. I don't know. Didn't ask him. What? But you said you did! You said Mr. Rothman wouldn't mind as long as no one found out about it. And he won't mind, as long as he and everyone else doesn't know. We should go. We'll get in trouble. I'm not going anywhere. Not until I catch a treasure. See, that's another way you're just like a dandelion. They're stubborn and don't go away, just like you. Why are you even talking about all this flower shop stuff anyway? You know I can't come see you if you're surrounded by all those dumb flowers. Dad says they make me sick. Now I really want a flower shop. He looked at her, and she remembered seeing sadness in his eyes. Even back then, Artemis hated the idea of being all alone. She slid over to the side, resting against the railing of the ship, and pulled her knees to her chest. Well, what do you think I should do when I grow up? You could come with me. Why? What are you going to be when you grow up? Someone who owns a boat. You want to be a fisherman? No, I want to be rich. Rich enough that I can have a boat of my own, just like this one, with my own people to load it for me and my own crew to help sail it. What are you going to do with your own boat? She asked, her grin widening. Where are you going to go? Whatever I want, wherever I want. When you're rich, it's like that. You can buy anything, do anything, go anywhere, and that's what I'm going to do. Mama got me a book with drawings of these places that are far away from here, and I'm going to see them all. What kind of places? She asked with excitement. This is fun. Awesome places, like a jungle that's full of lizards so big they make the ground shake when they walk. Her eyes widened at the thought as he hopped to his feet in excitement. And there's a secret island that's full of nothing but elves, where humans aren't allowed to go. I'll have to sneak onto that one. And there are magical cities that float in the sky, and kingdoms where all the dragons are purple. And there are oceans that are always warm and are full of all kinds of weird, bright-colored fish. She gasped at the sound of that. She imagined it, a majestic galleon sailing over the crystal blue seas, wherein swam fish of every size and color, a rainbow all the more beautiful because it was alive. She envisioned the golden domes of Am and red sands of Calimshan, the emerald forests of the Moonshay and the purple banners of Cormyr, the warm pinks and oranges of twilit horizons fading into indigo and violet nights illuminated by glittering unknown stars. She saw it all so vividly, a whole world of colors, of possibilities, the world that Artemis saw every day, a world that she needed to shape, to share, to hold in her hands. We'll fight pirates and monsters, he said, staring out over the harbor, but seeing the world beyond it. We'll sail every ocean, see every sight. Will there be candy? She asked elatedly, hugging her knees tightly. Heck yeah, as much as we want. We'll eat candy till we pop, and we'll never go to bed. We'll drink the fanciest wine, and we'll wear the fanciest clothes, and have the fanciest stuff. And Gil will be there, and Zoe, and Fitz, and everyone. We'll get free of this place, and we'll have all sorts of adventures, all of us, together. She watched him for a long moment as he kept going on, about the creatures they'd see, the things they'd do. Her smile never waned. I don't care what anyone says, she whispered into her knees. I think dandelions are beautiful. That's why they're my favorite. A thought crossed her mind, one that had never done so before. A burning question, a singular curiosity. Zoe had told her about it, but she wanted to know, for herself, what... Hey, what are you kids doing here? Came a shout from behind them. It was Mr. Rothwin, of course, having finally returned from God's only nowhere, along with 3 of his workers. He was hustling up the steps of the aft deck, waving his truncheon angrily. She shot a glare at Artemis. I've told you dark rats to stay the hells away from these boats. We were just fishing. We weren't hurting anything, he explained, even though it was pointless. The nobles Rothwin worked for didn't want low-class vermin on their ships for any reason, unless, of course, they were loading them. Artemis looked over to her and grabbed her hand. They nodded in agreement, and leaped off the back of the boat, landing feet first into the harbor below. Over the sounds of splashing and their gasping breaths from how cold the water was, Emma could make out Rothwin shouting. Next time I catch you on one of these boats, I'll keel-haul you myself. Gotta catch us first, Artemis shouted back up at him. The question returned to her mind, more insistent now. There was something about him in that moment. Wet hair still in his eyes, devilish grin on his face, a shivering laughter in his voice. That told her now was the time. She had to know. Artemis brushed his hair back. She kissed him. It wasn't much of a kiss,
A quick peck on the lips, really, but Artemis went red as a cherry and silent as a corpse. It was his first time, too, after all. She pulled away with a quizzical smirk on her face, her eyes glancing up and to the side as if considering, scrutinizing what had just happened. He just kept staring at her in stunned silence. She gave a thoughtful and began to swam off. Hey, Emma! Artemis called to her after several seconds. Wait, Emma! What was that for? Emma! Emma! Let's see. It was fun. It was thrilling. Made her feel all warm inside. Brought a smile to her face. And, best of all, it made boys panic. Yeah. She could get used to this whole kissing thing. This is, without a doubt, the dumbest thing you've ever done, Emelia said through the bedroom door. And that's really saying something. Your opinion is noted, Artemis said with a slight grunt. Have you seen my shirt? She closed her eyes and handed him one through the cracked door. Here, try it on. The hell's is this? Where's my shirt? I threw it out. You what? It had an arrow hole and a huge blood stain on it. That was my favorite shirt. It was Calashat silk. Oh, stop your belly aching and put it on. What? Are you serious? Could you have picked a more boring shirt? It's what I had laying around. Deal with it. You had a man's plain white shirt just laying around. If you want to stay in heel, like a sane person, we can go shopping for something more your style. I'll make do. Oh, come on, Artemis, you're being ridiculous. I've put you out enough as it is. Time I was moving on. Oh, don't even try that line with me, Artemis Black. You'd lounge about all day if you thought you could. Guilty as charged. She nearly fell backwards as he opened the door she was leaning on. He stood there, clad in his dark pants and the white shirt, holding his arms out to the side, inspecting his appearance. It fits all right, he said. Moves good, breathes pretty well. How much do I owe you? Nothing, she said, her eyes downcast. I, really did have it lying around. There was an awkward silence as he turned back around and started putting on his tie. I'm sorry about Roland, he said finally. He was a good man. I'll return the shirt once I pick up another Inyata. Keep it, really. He always wore it to my exhibition premieres. Said it was lucky like that. Who knows, maybe it is. Well, I could certainly use a bat of that right about now, he chuckled, walking out into the living room and over to his bag. His pace was slow, and he was using the furniture to steady himself as he went. You wouldn't need luck if you just stay in bed like you're supposed to. I need to see a man about a horse. Did you go through my purse? Oh, your halfling friend, Badger, was it? He said he needed to borrow some money from you, but that someone named Dewey would pay you back. I'm going to throttle that little... It's fine. He slung the pack over his shoulder and staggered from the effort. If he hadn't grabbed onto the love seat, he'd likely have fallen. Artemis, you need to... I said it's fine, he snapped. It's fine, I'm fine, everything is fine. Gods damn it, look at you! You could barely walk! Then I'll buy a cane, a nice one, something to go with my outfit. You don't need a cane, you need to fucking lie down. Lynette said you needed to take it easy for 2 months. It's not even been half that. Talona have mercy, your fever broke not even a 10-day ago. And in another 10-day, the horses are going to be running in Yata. I need to leave now if I'm going to make them. With my info, I can make 3 months' worth of Baroom card games easy. You think some crooked horse race is worth all this? I've made up my mind, Emma. I'm going. That set her off. You self-centered asshole. 3 years you go missing, without so much as a peep, a letter, or anything. And it's not like you haven't been in town. That's right. I asked around. I know you were here last winter. And did you stop by? Drop me a line? No. Why would you ever stop and think about me, of all people, huh? He stood there, staring at her with those dumb hazel eyes of his, a stoic expression on his face. He gave no hint of interrupting her, so she continued. I mean, we've only been friends since we were, 5, 6? But hey, if that's how you feel, then whatever. But then you have the nerve to show up at my door, shot full of holes, half dead, with an animal smuggler and a necromancer, and expect me to take care of you. And all this because you decided it was a good idea to get on the bad side of some blackheart who just happens to be part of the goddamn Zentarum. I'm sorry about the inconvenience. I'll pay you for your trouble.
Oh, you go straight to hell, Artemis Black. I don't want your fucking money. Well, what do you want? For me to apologize for not writing you? I'm sorry, all right? What I want is for you to act like you have some sort of brain to weigh down that head of yours before it blows away like a dandelion. What is it with you? Why are you so hell's bent on killing yourself? I'm not, but this is something I have to do. I need to keep moving forward or I'll never get back to where I was. Even if it means tearing yourself apart in the process? If need be, yes. She stared at him, studied him for a long moment. He'd been with her for 10 days, but she realized that she was just now truly seeing him. You've changed. He didn't answer. You're angry about something. I can see it in those dumb eyes of yours. Angry and hurt. That's why you talk in your sleep. Cry in your sleep. He looked away. You've always taken risks, even before you met Quinton, but they were always predicted, calculated, mitigated. They were always part of a plan of some sort, even if you didn't know all the details of the plan at the time. But this is stupid, crazy, desperate. He turned from her, but dared not move. When we were growing up, you always had this, energy about you, this magic. It was like you walked through life with a secret that only you knew, like you saw something that we couldn't. When you looked at us, you didn't see gutter snipes, you saw our potential. You saw not just the people we were, but the people we could be. And you don't know how much that meant to us, to me, to know that someone, anyone, believed in us. He lowered his head, knowing what was coming next. But you're not like that anymore. The only potential you see in people is their potential to help you. Badger was just a debt to collect on. Lynette is your surgeon in a pinch. And me? Well, I'm the biggest sucker of them all, aren't I? She fell silent for a moment that was an eternity. It wasn't all true. She knew, but enough of it was. Enough of it and more. She considered him one more time. Something happened, didn't it? Something you're not telling me. You said something about getting back to where you were. He said nothing. It was 3 years ago, I bet. That's why you disappeared. Why you're acting like an idiot now. That's about the time you got that bounty on your head? The one from Draven Brightwater? Was it something to do with that daughter of his? He clenched his fists. It doesn't matter. If you don't want to say, that's fine, but Artemis, you're better than this. You spent all those years seeing us for what we could be. Now it's my turn to do the same for you. 'Cause you act so cynical, like none of this weighs on you, like you don't care about anything or anyone. But the truth is, you were always the one who cared the most, because that's who you are. You're a man who dreams, and you're a man who loves. She walked up and embraced him from behind. And that's the man that I see, the man that I believe you can... Roland's dead, Emma. She froze. He died out there. Well, you couldn't help him. Well, you couldn't save him. Well, you couldn't even say goodbye. And it tears you up inside. That's why you still have a closet full of his clothes. That's why you torture yourself with that pin of theirs there on the mantle, so you never forget how you let him down. And that's what this is about. You can't stand to be alone, to have to go back to a home where there's no one else there. And you think that if you can protect me, if you can be there for me, then maybe it'll make up for the fact that you weren't there for him. But you can't help me, Emma, and you can't stop me from going, just like you couldn't stop Roland from going. The wave hit her again. Her throat grew tight. Her vision blurred. Tears poured down her cheeks. She released him and sobbed loudly into her hands. He was right, of course. He was always right about these things. But the truth in his words did nothing to alleviate their sting. Artemis Black had always been many things, but cruel hadn't been one of them. Not to her. Never to her. He opened the door. Don't ever come back. She didn't mean it. She knew that as soon as she'd said it, and, truth be told, he probably didn't mean what he said either. But it was okay. Any moment now he was going to turn around, with that sparkle in those green gold hazel eyes and that grin, that defiant, cocky grin of his. How many thugs had that grin stared down? How many tight spots had it seen them through? No matter how scary the enemy, no matter how bad the odds, they could always look to that grin for hope. It meant he saw something you didn't. It meant he had a plan. It meant there was still hope.
It was his sword, it was his shield. In all the world was anything so inspiring, so beautiful, so dangerous as that grin. Any second he'd turn around, he'd flash that grin, and she'd crumble. How could she not? She'd crumble, and he'd crumble, and everything would be okay. But he didn't turn around. He didn't say anything. He just walked out the door, his head hung low. She wanted to cry out, tried to cry out, but her anger ruled her. Her voice betrayed her. She just closed the door and burst into another fit of choking sobs. She'd lost them all, her family, the old gang, Roland, and now her oldest friend. Artemis was dead, not like Roland, but dead all the same. 3 years ago he had vanished, and what had come back was nothing but a shadow wearing his face. End of Volume 2.